Hello guys, I wanted to share some thoughts and talk a little bit about orchestral reductions and how to deal with them. I know that many pianists dislike playing orchestral reductions, and I can't really understand why. It's very challenging, it's time consuming. Most of the time, or many times, you're not necessarily playing what is written in the score. You have to do a little bit of adaptation to make it work. And yeah, and that's probably the reason why people reject playing orchestral reductions in comparison to a violin sonata or a work written originally for piano. But anyways, it's something that you will have to do at some point in your life, so it's good to have a toolbox and some ideas on how to deal with them. I will be illustrating some examples of the Violin Concerto number 2 by Prokofiev, and I'm using this orchestral reduction by Bussy and Hawkes. So the first thing that I did when I started preparing for this concerto, and that's something that I normally do with any orchestral reduction, is find a recording on YouTube or anywhere else and really listen to the recording following the score of the reduction to figure out what the person doing the reduction took out or how did he deal with the voicing and that type of thing. And just by doing that, you will probably realize that some of the things that are written in the reduction need to be changed. The second thing that I would do is trying to get a full score, the orchestral score, the original score, which looks like this. So you can see all the instruments. It's very useful. You will find it very useful, especially when there are specific passages that you need to adapt. And then it's very useful to have the orchestral reduction to see what to do. Once you have done all the adaptations and changes that you need to do with the reduction, my final advice would be practicing with a recording. It's very helpful, and in fact what I do is I use some headphones and I just play the reduction using different versions on the internet, with different performance, different tempos, and that will really help you follow any sort of rubato or any sort of tempo change that the soloist that you're playing with can bring to the table. I just want to show you a couple places where I did changes in the reduction on this concerto in particular, and one example would be rehearsal number 15 on the first movement. You will find that on the reduction, on the fourth measure after 15, you have this on the reduction. Then if you take a look at the original orchestral score, you will find that the woodwinds are doing that melody very loud. It's forte with accent. And then that inner accompaniment, the one that the reduction wrote like this, it's actually performed by the violins, first and second violins, in a softer dynamic, and it's actually like 16 notes instead of 8 notes. The problem is that once you listen to the recording, you will notice that pretty much the only thing that you can hear on the recording is that melody with the bass, and that's why I decided to take this out, because if you play what is written, then you're missing the flutes and you're just giving more importance to the accompaniment here. And then the melody, it's even harder to play legato. It's not worth it, in my opinion. So I just decided to take out this inner voice and duplicate the melody 1 octave higher. So there you have all the woodwinds and the bass with the cello. So yeah, double bass and cello in the left hand. Also, the tempo of that passage is quite fast to be able to perform it clean and with all those notes. It's just not worth it. Life is too short. So that's one example where I did a little change. Another example would be in the recapitulation of the first movement, rehearsal number 22. I don't understand why in this particular passage the reduction has included this violin accompaniment. I don't understand why they did that, because at the beginning on the same passage in the exposition it doesn't show that accompaniment. So there's no consistency. There's no consistency in that reduction. And moreover, if you play that accompaniment, then the real melody, which is bassoons and woodwinds in general, it would be very obscure if you add this in the middle. It's just so it's pretty difficult. I don't know. I tried it for a while and it didn't work. I think it's not worth it. I would do it the same way as the exposition, where it's simply 4 measures after that, the same thing happens. I would just take out all the... It's just very uncomfortable. It's one hand on top of the other and they're interrupting each other. It's not worth it. Another little thing that I changed is on rehearsal number 27. You will find in the reduction, the right hand is doing for 2 measures. But then what happens is that the third measure, the left hand takes over that accompaniment and is doing instead of... I think that's a little awkward. I thought that was weird. So I took a look at the original score, and let me find it, 27. And this is what is written in the original score. So you have second violins doing, violas doing. So technically, that would be the most fair representation of the original, but of course that's very uncomfortable and it's supposed to be pianissimo. So I can understand why to avoid the repeated notes, but instead of doing, I would just do from the beginning. And then once the left hand takes over, just keeping the same pattern. It makes more sense to me. On the second movement of this concerto, there are also a couple places where I did important changes. The first place would be rehearsal number 32. In this passage, what is written in the reduction, it really doesn't work, I think. So this is what is written. I'll try to play it. I'm actually leaving notes out. It's just very awkward. And if you listen to the recording, there's no way that you can do that jump. It just doesn't sound like the orchestra at all, because it has to sound together. But the problem is that you have the melody here. So how do you play melody and all these inner voices at the same time without changing the rhythm? So what I did is I took this inner voice of the left hand 1 octave lower. I played it 1 octave lower in a way that I can play it with the bass. You see? And then I can play the melody on the right hand, and it sounds much better, much like the orchestra. By the way, I'm also leaving out this inner voice in the right hand. It's just not worth it, because if you interrupt the melody with that, doesn't make any sense. Also, you're just duplicating the same accompaniment, so something like this. think that's as good as this. It's just my opinion. Also, on the second movement, I did a little change on rehearsal number 34. In the original reduction, you find these repeated notes, etc. And that's supposed to be performed by the flute in the orchestra. What happens is that the flute can play repeated notes beautifully, I think, better than the piano, to be honest. And they can do beautiful shaping with those repeated notes. It's supposed to be piano and legato. But then really when you listen to the recording, it flows much better on the flute than on the piano because the tempo is quite fast. So replicating that sonority on the piano, in my opinion, doesn't work that well. So what I do is I take out the repeated notes and I just do a legato melody. Etc. I think that sounds much better than it's just too difficult and it sounds uncomfortable, and it is really, really uncomfortable. So that's something to consider too. On the third movement, I didn't do many changes to the reduction. I think it's pretty well written. Just a few things here and there, but I wanted to mention though that at the very end, on rehearsal number 83, when you have the tumultuoso section, it's really hard, and you have one hand on top of each other with the repeated chords. I'll play a little under tempo. So one possible simplification would be leaving out the third repeated chord on the left hand whenever you have that. So the original says etc. So what you can do, because this is quite fast, it's quite fast. So what you can do is leave out the third chord. Instead of doing, you can do, and that will give you more time to prepare for the next position. And it sounds pretty similar once you add the pedal. The pedal sounds, etc. And then at the very, very end, 2 measures before the end, or 3 measures before the end, this jump, this is how I solved it. So originally it's written, which is extremely uncomfortable. It's very fast. It's pa-pam. I think it doesn't work like that. So I'll just play with my thumb the A. I'll do this with the right hand and this with the left hand. And it sounds pretty much the same. So just something to consider. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can find a link to the Spanish version of this video